Hello, and welcome to Pushing Cardboard. I'm Grant Lindenberg, and this is episode 6, Check That Impulse. Area impulse games are a favorite design style for me. Today we'll be talking about area impulse games in general, as well as taking a deeper dive into Mike Rinella's Stalingrad, Verdun on the Volga, one of my favorite area impulse games. Before we get started, I wanted to thank everyone who commented on the previous episode, the interview with Carl Paradis. When I started the podcast, I hadn't intended to do designer interviews, but with folks so excited about his game, Absolute War, I gave it a shot. And judging by the downloads, folks were interested to hear him talk about it. So thanks to everyone who commented and who downloaded the episode. I might have to try that again. What's been going on before we get into the meat of the episode? Quite a few new games in the collection this week, or this month, I should say. I got the Hollow Legions reprint from MMP, the new Undaunted Reinforcements box, the expansion box to the Undaunted series. I got used copies of France 1940 from Avalon Hill, Kharkov Battles Before and After Fall Blau, and Wir sind das Volk. All of those were, I got those in a math trade. I got a copy of Pax Pamir, 2nd edition, and as well, a couple of P500 things came through the letterbox, Salerno 43 and Pacific War, both from GMT. That's a lot of games coming in, with having a P500 from GMT and the similar thing on the Hollow Legions from MMP, and then Canadian Math Trade all at the same time. Mrs. Cardboard Pusher is generally very understanding, but this was a lot to show up in the same month. Anyway, I've got a lot to get through in the next while if I want to get all of these to the table. In terms of what I've been playing. Lots of Vassal PBEM as usual. Lots of the old Command and Colors series. Still playing Ancients, Tricorn, and Samurai. I'm sort of playing Napoleon still, but I upgraded to the latest Vassal module for Commands and Colors Napoleon, and it's not very well suited to PBM play at all. There's a ton of, it's a really great module for live play. The designer's done a terrific job. There's a ton of automation, and it keeps track of who's who, but it really doesn't work very well for PBEM in that it really expects whoever's turn it is to be the one rolling the dice, for example, or whoever's turn it is. You can't like for example in Command and Colors Napoleonics, you will often if there's an opportunity to form a square, you attack the other guy, and then you just say, well, look, you decide if you square or not, and then you roll the results and send it back on your turn. In the meantime, I'll just take my card. The new Commands and Colors module won't let you do any of that. So it's I'm at a bit of a impasse with CCN for now. I have been working with the module designer to we've been playing some CCN over Vassal just to try and get him to see what the challenges are for PBEM on that module, because he's very much a live tournament player, and so when he did the update to the module, that's really what he had in mind. So I'm hoping that with him seeing some of the challenges, he might be able to reconfigure the module to make it a little more PBEM friendly. The other option is I can always go back and use one module previous, but it'd be nice to have the latest and greatest, that's for sure. Still playing ASL. Been playing that King's Highway sort of mini campaign game. That's been really fun. There's been just a boatload of boxcars and snake eyes in that game. So there's malfunction weapons all over the time, all over the place. But also, I had for example, I had a Firefly tank take a bounding fire shot and get snake eyes and manage to kill a panther. So that was good luck for me because he's got more panthers than I have. I've only got one Firefly and a couple of other Shermans. So that was one heck of a lucky shot. I'm also playing another couple just regular ASL scenarios. One that's German-Russian urban scenario, and then another one that's French-German from 1940s, more a bridge crossing scenario. That's kind of interesting as well. My Unhappy King Charles game continues along. That game continues to surprise me and delight me. I will keep playing that for sure. I've been playing Imperial Struggle still. My partner with that game, I think he's decided that this might be the last time he ever plays it. He's not. He finds the whole thing a bit too fiddly, but we'll probably finish it out and then move on to something else. Still playing Nemesis Burma 1944. That's great game. Keep playing that, as well as Corregidor Return to the Rock with the same opponent. I think he's gonna do me in the Burma game, but I think I might get him back in the Corregidor game. So fair's fair there. I've got a PBEM of Stalingrad Verdun on the Volga ongoing, which was we'll talk about that game in depth as we go along. I'm playing Undaunted Normandy as well still, and Combat Commander Europe. Those games. As well, and also I think I still have a game of Commands and Colors Tricorn. So yeah, still got quite a few PBEMs going. With the new games coming in, I immediately took France 40 out for a solo spin and played. Just picked a couple of the scenario setups and played about half a game solo, and that was really enjoyable. That's a game that I'd never had my own copy of before and never played it before, and it always just had the snappiest box cover. There's something about that game that I always wished I would have tried it out, and I never did because I don't know, something about France 40. The situation just seemed so lopsided, but I gave it a go, and I'll probably try that again. It's an interesting game in that you can there's a variety of sort of what if. There's a historical scenario, and then there's sort of 6 what if setups for one side and 11 for the other. So there's a lot of variability in how you set that game up, and it doesn't have to be a sort of a steamroller by the Germans. I also gave a try to almost a full game. The first 2/3 of Wir sind das Volk. I'm not really interested in the semantics of what is and isn't a war game, but this clearly isn't a war game. There's no war involved. It's a game about Germany, the divided Germany between the end of the war and when the wall came down in 89, basically. And one side is the East and one side is the West, and you're trying to outdo the other side and make your population be the happier population. And I suppose you're hoping that one side will cross over to the other. I can't really remember what all the victory conditions were there, but I just wanted to see the mechanics of how it worked. And it's a really interesting game. I'll probably talk about that one in a future episode as well, as it's unlike anything I'd ever played before, and that's it's got a lot of mechanics that I hadn't seen before, so that was really great. Also, speaking of the new games that came in, if you're interested in Pacific War, the new version from GMT, the redone version of the old Victory Games game, check out my unboxing video. Just go to pushingcardboard.com, and in the videos section you'll find it. It's I don't if you've never seen this game before. It's a giant box. It's a door stopper. And you know it's probably about 20 pounds. This thing is huge, and it's got 10 sheets of counters, and it's in terms of all the maps, all the rule books, like 5 different rule books or scenario books, what have you. With all that in the box is full. I'm sure once you start punching the counters, you're going to you'll never get it all back into the same box. But anyway, I look forward to diving into that. But that's a long project. That's a game that's rated 9 on GMT's complexity scale, and I don't for a second doubt that it rates a 9. I'm sure it does, but I'll get to it eventually. Okay, let's talk about Stalingrad, Verdun on the Volga by Mike Rinella, Last Stand Games. I think that might be Mike's own self-publishing company. I'm not sure about that. It's not exactly a remake of Turning Point Stalingrad, the old game from Avalon Hill, but it sort of is. I'm a big fan of Area Impulse games. Courtney Allen, who designed both Upfront and Storm over Arnhem, he's maybe my favorite all-time designer, just for those 2 groundbreaking designs alone. Upfront will forever be in my top 3 games, I'm sure. And Storm over Arnhem created the whole Area Impulse line of games, much like We the People by Mark Herman invented the CDG. Storm over Arnhem led to Thunder at Casino, Turning Point Stalingrad, and then Breakout Normandy, all by Avalon Hill. And then since then, there's been dozens and dozens of Area Impulse games. And I'd say Mike Rinella is probably the current master designer of the format. The original Area Impulse idea was revolutionary. It got rid of hexes and used areas instead. But it was really the impulse system that changed things. In a traditional hex and counter game, the play is generally I go, you go, where I move all my guys and fire at you, then you move all your guys and fire at me. Or sometimes I move, you move, I fire, you fire. But generally it's that thing of I do all mine and then you do all yours and back and forth. But in Storm over Arnhem, Courtney Allen introduced this impulse system, and it modified the I go, you go, so that instead of moving and attacking with all my units before you can go, I can only activate a single area's worth of units to move or attack from. Any units that I use are then flipped over to their spent side, which often has a lower combat value as well, and then you do the same. So we alternate back and forth until neither of us has any units that haven't been activated or any that we still want to activate. I do one area, attack you, then you pick an area, move or attack me, back and forth until we both pass, basically. And then we go to the next turn, and all the units become available to activate all over again by flipping them back to their fresh side. And that's the basic gist of the Area Impulse system. That's the basic gist of the first 2 titles, Storm over Arnhem and Thunder at Casino. Don Greenwood designed the next title in the series, Turning Point Stalingrad, and introduced a couple of innovations. In TPS, you didn't immediately return your units as fresh after the turn. Depending on how they were spent and if they were successful in their attacks or not, they might not return to their fresh side for 1 to 4 turns. So it became a game of managing your fresh resources and timing when you can take advantage of a mass of fresh units. This wasn't a mechanic that's been copied a lot over the years, but I liked it. I found it really fun. But more enduringly, Greenwood introduced this thing called the Sunset Dice Roll. On the first German attack roll of each impulse, if the German's dice roll is less than the current impulse number, the turn ends on that impulse. So other than on the first impulse, you're never certain you're going to get another impulse that turn. And then, of course, the higher the impulse number climbs, the more likely it is you are to end the turn. It's going to be more easy to roll under the impulse number. That was a real fresh idea for the impulse games, because you couldn't count on being able to use every unit every turn. So you know if there was something you really wanted to do, better to do it early in the impulse and not get trapped by losing the sunset die roll. Don Greenwood also designed Breakout Normandy for Avalon Hill, and that refined the system a little bit more. But since then, there's been lots of new designs using the basic area impulse framework. Storm over Stalingrad from MMP added cards, for example. And then, there's been lots. There's lots of different little incremental improvements, but I don't think anyone has pushed the frame harder than Mike Rinella through a variety of publishers. He's had magazine games such as Not War But Murder with, I think that was ATO. He's had full box games like Monty's Gamble with MMP, and then like a series of Ziploc games from Revolution Games, which are they're more the size of the original Storm over Arnhem rather than the big size of Turning Point Stalingrad, I'd say. And one of his latest ones, the Corregidor Return to the Rock, that adds a really fresh new mechanic called the momentum die roll. It kind of changes the sunset die roll so that one side might get often does get multiple impulses in a row before it switches over to the other person. Stalingrad, Verdun on the Volga came out in 2017. It's one of Mike Rinella's bigger games. It's a kind of mid-run in all of his area impulse designs, so he doesn't have the momentum mechanic there yet. But it's a big box game, sort of like the Turning Point Stalingrad. He said that he'd been a fan of Turning Point Stalingrad, but game design had kind of moved forward, as well as there's new order of battle info that came out of over the years. So he took a shot at designing the battle for his own. Setting it up, the game is very similar to its inspiration. The map is longish and wide, but not deep, with the Volga on the Russian player's board edge. There's abstracted zones along all four board edges, much like Turning Point Stalingrad. The order of battle's changed, but it'll be very familiar. And gameplay follows the same basic sequence. Russian activates an area to move and or attack from, and then the German does the same back and forth. The German's first dice roll serves as the sunset roll to determine if there will be more impulses this turn or not. Movements, generally very simple. Most infantry movements have 4 or 3 movement points, whereas armored or mech units have 6 or 5 movement points, and it generally just costs 1 movement point to move into an adjacent area, 2 if there's an enemy adjacent to that area that you're moving into, or 4 if there's an enemy in the area you're trying to move into. Some area boundaries can only be crossed by infantry, and there's the different, each area has its own terrain type and a variety of terrain effects modifiers for defending. Likewise, attacking is pretty simple. The attacker indicates which unit is leading the attack, and then you take that unit's combat value, add 1 for every other unit attacking with it, and add 1 if at least 3 of the units are from the same division, which are color-coded to make it easy to see, as well as a +2 if you have any divisional artillery, and you get to roll a die to see if you have air support, you get to roll the die, a single 1d6 to see how much air support you'll receive. You add all up that all up, and that gives you an attack value. And then the defender, similarly, he designates a lead defender, takes that unit's combat value +1 for each extra defender, plus the terrain effects modifier number. And he can also add in artillery, although the Russian, who's usually on the defense, has a very limited amount. So you add all that together and you'll get the defense value. Then each player rolls 2 dice, adds their dice total to their attack or defense value, and the high total wins. If the attacker wins, the difference in the totals will be how many loss factors the defender has to take. Losses can be absorbed by retreats as well as eliminations. But if the attacker loses, he's got to take a step loss with all of his attacking units and then move them all back to where they attacked from. An added twist in this game that makes it very different from Turning Point Stalingrad is that the lead attacking unit is reduced by a step, even if it wins. So built right into the combat system, it's a much more attritional model. Also worth mentioning is the possibility of overruns in the right terrain and with the right rolls. So you can attack one and then move right on and attack in another adjacent area. Of course, there's also rules for the Soviet player to make heroic defenses against overruns and stop you from rolling right through them. The German gets 2 moves per day impulse. There's day impulses and the night impulses, and has 2 air units which can be used each impulse. That's a lot of air help in the daytime for the German. Each German division also has a division artillery counter that can be used once per day, so they're a little more precious. You can't just keep using them impulse after impulse. But the German should expect to steamroll through a bit in the early going. However, the Russian has rubble to up his terrain effects, and he can also create fortifications when it's his move as well. And also, when the German attacks in certain in forests or urban areas, if his attack is super heavy, he might create even more rubble. So the game, there's more and more rubble and fortification counters to help the Russian player out as the game goes along. After the German fails the sunset roll, you switch to the night part of the turn. And while we're in the night, the German gets no air support and doesn't get those double impulses. Moreover, the Soviet has a storm group marker that he can use. He can deploy each time he attacks at night in forest or urban areas. There's a few restrictions on it in the first few turns, but this gives a bonus similar to the German air roll. He gets a 1 to 6 bonus. Night is also the only time that the Russians can bring units across the Volga, so that's when their reinforcements pour across the river. And finally, the Soviets get an extra movement point at night. So the night is, as you might expect, favorable to the Russians. Along with the regular movement and attack moves, players can use their impulse to regroup or redeploy or troop transfer. These are all different types of strategic movements to move your troops around, as so long as they're not in enemy-controlled areas. Once the night ends, and it's a similar sunset roll thing, I guess this one would be the daylight roll, there's a refit phase where each player can spend a few points to flip a couple of their units back to full strength. The Russian generally has more here, and there's not a lot either way. I think often the German just gets maybe 2 units, and the Russian gets 4 that you can flip back to full strength. So the step losses keep adding up for you. Once you're done that, that's the end of a full turn. There's a turn track, and on all turns but the first, each player then starts the next turn by placing some reinforcements on the outer zones, which will then, in turn get moved into the battle during the regular maneuver impulse phases. The main game is only 5 turns long, but like the game it's loosely modeled on, there's extra counters and rules to extend the game, in this case to 10 turns. So it's not the same sort of a lengthier game like Turning Point Stalingrad, but it's a similar sort of feel where you can play a longer campaign game than just the initial 5 turns. Like a lot of other earlier area impulse games, there's an advantage marker in this game. In older games, this marker let the holder re-roll any roll, but then he had to pass the marker to his opponent. In this game, there's no real option for re-rolls, but there's a handful of other uses. Particularly handy is honing it at refit time, as it will give you a couple of extra refit points. So if you're the German and can hang on to it that long, or luck into having it at that point, that makes a big difference. Most of the areas along the Volga have a victory point value, and this is how the German wins the game. He wins at any time if he can control all the areas along the Volga, or after 5 turns if he has 10 points worth of victory points in those Volga areas. They're pretty straightforward victory terms. And there's similar rules if you decide to play the longer 10-turn game. And there's even an optional setup in case you want to play just the turn 6 to 10 portion of the game. So really the game comes with, two shorter scenarios and the one longer. I've played this game 3 or 4 times now. I've enjoyed it every time. And, sometimes I think Turning Point Stalingrad feels a little more fun, but I imagine this is a more historical model, though I use that term advisedly. I'm not actually, I don't know that I have a real definition of what that would even really mean. But somehow it just feels grittier and harder. Probably the thing that takes the most getting used to if you're a Turning Point Stalingrad player is the grinding down of your lead attacking units. You get very little in the way of refit, and you're never going to get all your lost steps back. So the game just there's a real attritional element to the game. And then as the Russian, you'll hate the fact that the German gets to constantly use his Stuka's everyday attack. It's an extra die 6 he gets for free everywhere. It's a bit maddening for the Russian player, I'm sure. As far as strategy for this game, I'm still learning. I've only got a few games under my belt, obviously. As the Russian, so far I think falling back is best, as you can get pretty chewed up if you stay forward and fight, especially if you attack early. In my games, Russians who tried to fall back as slowly as possible and created as many forts as they could fared far better than those who tried to counterattack early. As the German, in the daytime, you'll be balancing your moving and your attacking. You want to move and get your divisions together, but I really feel like it's best to attack as much as possible to take advantage of that air roll. Every time you move in the day without attacking, you're giving up a chance to roll that extra air support. This is a game that plays great on Vassal PBEM, even better if you're cool with having your opponents roll your dice. The attacker makes his moves, declares his attack, sends the file. The defender declares any arty that they're going to commit, and then the defender can roll the dice for both sides. There is a more stringent order for declaring asset use that can be used, but usually the Russian is out of assets, and so things go quickly. The current and only module of Vassal module for this is version 1.0 by Judd Vance. It works great. Judd puts in just enough automation to make things easy but not bogged down. For example, when the impulse marker is advanced, all the German air movements are moved back to their ready positions, and the arty markers are moved to the use position. You don't have to do any of the cleaning up after every impulse or at the end of impulse. And then at the end of the turn, all the markers are moved back to the ready position. I've only played this game via PBEM. BGG gives it a 3-hour playing time. That looks about right to me. I think you could play this game in an evening for sure. The components are good. The counters are fine. The map's good. The rules are tight and short, really. You can learn this game fairly quickly. It's a 20-page rule book, including examples of play and illustrations. It's not a big lift to learn this game by any means. I'm not much for rating games, but I'll just say that this is a keeper. I'm currently playing it, and I imagine it's going to get many more plays through the years. I really like this game. This episode, I'd like to give a shout out to a fellow podcaster. Mark Johnson's Wargames to Go has been running since 2013. Hats off just for the longevity. His podcast features smaller games, often magazine or Ziploc games, as Mark isn't a fan of bigger games. Additionally, Mark has often taken a look at a specific conflict or a specific period and done an episode or a whole series of episodes just devoted to that single topic. And as a bonus, he often reviews movies associated with the topic as well. His podcast is very thematically coherent. I have to say, I'm in no way a monster gamer, but neither am I much for small games. I don't know, call me Goldilocks. It's got to just feel kind of hit the right spot in the middle for me. But I've never been a fan of particularly small games or magazine games. I don't know. I just felt like there wasn't enough there for me. So, given Mark's preference for small games that often don't really interest me. I'm surprised that I still never miss an episode because Mark, he's got thoughtful things to say about the games and the movies, though I'm far more forgiving of the old acting styles than he is, and about what he learns about history from each one. As well, I'd say the signal to noise ratio here is 100 to 0. This is just straight wargaming and history content, which is my favorite thing. So, and I should mention the sound quality is always excellent. Doesn't matter if it's just him or him doing an interview. It's fantastic. I encourage you to check out Wargames to Go. I know every once in a while it sounds like Mark is tired of it and he's ready to throw in the hat. I hope he never does. But even if he never makes another episode, there's a deep archive there, and they're well worth a listen. He has good descriptions of games and really good descriptions about what he's learning from the games. Finally, this episode, I want to talk a little bit about war games and current events. No, don't worry. I'm not. Nothing about this is going to get freaky and political or anything like that. I just noticed about myself, but I'm sure other people are feeling exactly the same or completely opposite. I noticed that with the current Russian invasion of Ukraine, I've seen plenty of gamers eager to game the situation, and I get that that's their way of understanding what's going on. That's totally cool, but I have to say it just makes me kind of queasy. I've never been good at. I've never felt good about gaming recent conflicts. I mean, I don't think I actually played a Vietnam game until the late '90s or early 2000s. It just felt too close. I don't know. Something about our hobby just makes me more comfortable when the history isn't recent. I tried playing Labyrinth last year, but just reading some of the rule book, it turned me off. The politics of the period are still too raw to me, I think. So I don't know. Perhaps maybe that's it's more politics than timing. I don't know. I was thinking that I also can't really read the rules to Pax Porfiriana without laughing and swearing at the designer, and that's got nothing to do with recent history. But I will say that in that case, even though the rule book drives me crazy, I really like that game. So go figure. Anyway, I don't know. How do you feel about wargaming current events? Are you cool with it? Does it help you understand? What's your take on it? I know I don't enjoy it and don't do it much, but I don't have any strong feelings about those who feel that that's their way to understand things or deepen their understanding. I feel like I'm getting a little better at it. I enjoyed Brian Train's brief Border Wars last year, as well as a partial play of A Distant Plain. So maybe there's hope for me on this front yet. Anyway. Thanks for listening. You can look for me at pushingcardboard.com on the web, where you can comment on anything you hear here. And we now have forums where you can discuss anything from the podcast to war games in general. I really encourage folks to either comment on the individual episodes or join in on the forums. That would be great. I'd love to hear your feedback on the podcast, as well as how you feel about wargaming and ongoing conflicts, things like that. Do these deep dives into games work for you? Do you appreciate the bits of wargaming history thrown in? Or perhaps I get half of that history wrong. This is one guy's memory, that's for sure. I've got no shortage of war games to talk about going forward, but I'd also like to know what you're interested in hearing. So pushingcardboard.com is the place to get a hold of me. Let me know what you think. Or you can follow me on Twitter at cardboardpusher. And finally, if you enjoyed the podcast or these podcasts, give us a rating on your favorite podcast app and tell a buddy to listen as well. Thanks again for listening.